So it's easy to be anti-Albanese and anti-government, but you still got to be able to back it up with some sort of information for people to be able to think on the run, because they're too busy and they just hear the propaganda machine pump it out all day long saying, this is amazing. So back in 2000, I was a first-home buyer. I heard the first home buyers grant was coming out, and I was like, this is my chance to get into the market. Now, I thought that I was a world-beating property investor because I invested in southeast Queensland on the sunny coast, Buderim Meadows, for $194,000. $194,000 in Buderim Meadows for a 4-bedroom brick home. And I thought I was a world-beater because this scheme smashed the prices, went through the roof. But they will also say it was because of immigration and building and all of these different things that we needed more houses. So the house price went up. Familiar story. So, but what they will tell you is right now we're in a housing crisis, right? Because financial stress, when it spends more than 30% of its income on housing, so low supply, there is a significant shortfall in new home construction compared to population growth. Now remember, population growth, we don't have any Australian-born population growth. We are at 1.5 rebirth. We should be at 2.1 rebirth. It's been similar to that for 50 years. So Australia-born people do not rebirth at a rate that will repopulate ourselves. So when they say population growth, it's purely immigration. Let's not get down to that topic, but let's not deny the fact that we have low supply through to population growth. So the last thing we really need is more demand. If the supply is already very low, then we need less demand, which would mean that get rid of the population growth, right? Not throw more people into the market. High cost, record rents, are crushing the people, blah, blah, blah. Increased homelessness because of the affordability, right? And so they're saying that they're trying to promote first home buyers in Australia to be able to get into this market to help them. Now, they're saying that in 2000, when the first home buyers grant came out, it caused a price surge. So the surge in demand was especially for new homes quickly outpaced the supply of housing, leading to rapid increase in prices that went beyond what the grant was worth in helping you. Combined factors. It wasn't just the sole cause. Key contributor to the broader price boom in the 2000s, this boom was driven by historically low interest rates. Low interest rates. So the Reserve Bank of Australia's cash rate in 2000 was 4.75 when it started, and in 1 year pushed the interest rates up. It settled about 5.5% eventually at the end of the year. So it went way up and way down, because we all know how they handle money when there's too much supply and demand issue. They play around with the interest rate. So immediately they gave you 7,000 first home buyers grant. The interest rate went from that to that, which soaks up that money pretty quickly, and everybody else gets hit with it. But yet they're not looking at the fact that this rate is the current one, significantly less than what it is, than what they were back in 2000. So that would tell me that we're in danger of seriously outpricing anybody that's looking to get into the market once this little blip of growth spikes again from people buying houses they can't afford. Because, like I said, there's always a catch to this. So the average home price in Australia is $1 million. Don't believe me? Look it up on the Australian Bureau of Statistics. It's finally hit over $1 million for the average home price. But let's say the average buyer, for first home buyers, kids, young people under 35, you're probably looking at a unit or a 2-bedroom unit or something like that would be the most that you could afford. Let's say $500,000 to be realistic, even though the national average is $600,000 for home loans. So you wanted to buy a $500,000 house, and if you wanted to use your 20% deposit, right, you would be loaning $400,000, and your interest would end up on a 30-year loan, because that's what they are these days, $425,000, more than the loan itself. Or you take up the 5% deposit, which means that they're going to be, the lender's mortgage insurance will be covered by the government. Not sure who would be the person that will reap the house back off you if you default in that loan to value ratio pocket, like the insurer would normally, but I'm sure the government will allow you to default for a while before they take their house back off you. But the interesting part is total interest charge on that loan is $505,000. So you'll see $425,000, $505,000. So that means that all you did was transfer the missing deposit to the total interest paid over that 30 years. So we're going to put pressure on the housing market by making the buyer transfer the total deposit down into the interest charge. Now think about rental, right? So they say, oh, well, you'll get out of rental quicker, 10 years quicker, because you won't have to be saving for the deposit. Well, at the moment, most of the rental income goes to probably Australian investors, I'd imagine. It goes to Australian business, Australian investors, Australian super funds, you would think, right? And so what this transfer does is it takes it away from renting, puts you into a house that you can't necessarily afford. It will give you a little tick in the price of the value of it, which might cover the stamp duties and all that sort of stuff and make you feel like you've done a really smart job like me. But all it really does is puts extra pressure onto the housing market and gives you that payment that you would normally have paid to the bank. So the rent would have at least went to Australian super, Australian investors, Australian mums and dads. Instead, that rent or that deposit gets slung down to here and becomes probably the big four bank profit as well. So let's do it on the Australian average of $1 million for a house, right? Considering that most of us, 70%, live in the cities, and the ratio in the 70s for home price to income was 3 to 1. 3 times your wage was the average house price. Today they say it's 9 to 1. I would beg to differ to say it's probably more like 12 to 1, considering that would mean that the average wage in Australia would be over 100,000. Don't think that's possible or true. But let's go. Because in the cities, it's 18 to 1 in Brisbane, it's 21 to 1-ish in Sydney, and it's 20 to 1 in Melbourne. So that means that $1 million home with a 20% deposit will be 800 grand. Means that you will pay 851 in interest. Or take up Albanese's 5%, it'll be 950,000. It'll be 1 million in interest, and funnily enough, that is $160,000 difference between the original loan that we just talked about. You are transferring your deposit into your interest almost seamlessly and taking the profit from investors in this country out of their pockets and putting it into the bank. This is another attack on the Ponzi scheme. And like I said, a price surge apparently came because of population growth and low interest rates. And the interest rates stayed up at that for 5 years and started at the moment we're at that. So I'll finish with this. If you think that we are going to see less stress on the housing market when the first home buyers that couldn't afford to go into the market can now afford to go into the market, allegedly, isn't going to push up interest rates and isn't going to push up price because demand is going up, but supply hasn't changed. They've done nothing to change the availability of supply. In fact, the only reason it would continue to go up higher is because of more demand on the supply, right? So you're going to see an uptick in the Ponzi scheme, right? Because capitalism needs the Ponzi scheme. It needs the ability to continue to make that price rise, as it has done since the 70s when we took gold off the back of our dollar. So like I said, it is easy just to tag, oh, the government's no good and oh, this isn't helping, right? And there'll be people out there that'll be so excited to get into their first home, but you have just strangled yourself for the next 30 years. You are going to pay that deposit price in interest instead of in capital that you would have taken off your loan, right, by working for a price that was stabilised and stopped because interest rates weren't low, which they are, very low compared to 2000, and we weren't having an excess immigration problem that's going to keep that house demand rising. You're about to see the crushing of the middle class continue, as we will not be able to afford in 5 years or 10 years, but mostly 5 for the 2030. You will own nothing and you will be happy agenda. Welcome to the UN's plan for this country.